So while more folks are trickling in, I do want to introduce myself. I'm trying to wave at all of you as you come into the room. My name is Brandi Douglas. Pronouns are she, her, and hers. I am the Senior Communications Associate at NDN Collective. I am a Puyallup Tribal member, Black and Mexican, and also proudly queer. I just want to emphasize that I'm super excited for this conversation today. Like it's just like bubbling up, that excitement. For those of you already on here, I welcome you to invite your friends to the conversation and also let them know if they can't tune in right now. We'll be saving this conversation to our channel so that they can watch it later and also you can watch it later. So we're going to take a moment to invite our guest in. Just one moment. While we're doing that, I want to remind you to follow us on Facebook. Obviously, you are on Instagram right now. Keep tuning into our content there. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, and be sure to subscribe to our Indian Collective YouTube channel. We've got a lot of good content coming out of there. And most importantly, as we engage in this conversation, remember that this is a respectful place. Make sure your comments are respectful. We'll be paying attention to those comments to make sure that all that good energy is flowing. Hey. How are you doing? So excited to have you here with us.
Good.
Is your day going good?
Yeah.
Awesome. Hopefully we can keep up that energy with this conversation. Obviously, our topic today is liberation through identity and expression. And of course, we have the amazing Coyote Park here with us. I'm so thrilled and blessed to have you here and excited to hear your words, wisdom, experience, and all the medicine that you're going to be sharing with us. And so I'll go ahead and open the floor for you to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Here, wait, okay. Can you hear me well though? Is my audio good?
Oh yeah, your audio is great.
Okay, awesome. So Ayukui Moklo Kimekinas Ne Eolek Shegep Ta'anoyek. I was just saying, hi. Thank you for coming. So Neolek Shigip, my name is Coyote. And Ta'anoyek, it's hot over here. In California, where I'm in Tovangar right now, so Tongva territory. And a little bit of an intro about me. I'm Two-Spirit. I'm a part of the Yurok tribe. I'm indigenous to the Klamath River, so Northern California, so-called Northern California. And I'm mixed race, so I'm Yurok, German, and Korean. I grew up in Hawaii, so on the islands of Oahu in the Kingdom of Hawaii. So I guess shout out to my Kanaka Sibs. So I recently lived in Lenapehoking in New York for the past 5 years, but I relocated to LA where my wife is and also my relatives that are indigenous to the Klamath have moved back down to Orange County. So I'm close to like my cousins and my grandma and everyone over here, while still being closer to my ancestral homelands. I'm a photographer and I am just like a mixed media artist. I do a lot of like writing, painting, some curating, and but mainly a photographer. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here and to talk about more art stuff and to talk about identity, and also just to be here right now with Brandi because I have so much love for them. Oh, my pronouns are he or they. Yeah.
All Thank you. Thank you so much for that introduction. Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited for this conversation also. And just to let viewers know, Coyote and I actually met through a pen pal program. Um, it was last year, like during the beginning of the pandemic. It was through the Native Pen Pal project. We obviously both signed up and somehow became, we were connected as pen pals. And so I remember getting their first letter, and then I think you shared like your social media handle, and I like was like, oh, I'll check them out on Instagram, and like you had like thousands of followers. So I was
Oh,
like, wow.
no. I also just like remember too signing up for that, and then it has like a specific area where it's like what type of pen pal do you want to be paired with? And I just wrote, oh, as long as they're like also queer.
Yes,
I
yes, I remember that. And when and when I got a letter, I was like, whoa, like this is so amazing. Like I actually got a pen pal with those specifications. It was so awesome. So awesome.
I also,
And so happy to just finally, oh yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just saying it was so sweet because sending you that letter, I also like beaded you some earrings at the time because I was in the beginning of like quarantine where I actually had time to bead. So I was like up all night making your earrings. So I was like, I gotta send you back the letter soon. I was like beading, like not sleeping at nighttime.
Oh, I remember getting those earrings. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. I think I probably cried, but
Uh,
yeah, they're so beautiful. And then I was like, I need to learn how to bead. I did have a period during the in the midst of the pandemic where I was trying to teach myself how to bead as well, but not to your level. I'll get there someday and I'll send you some earrings.
time to be
Um,
time.
so yeah, so you ready to jump into this conversation?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So obviously, so many of us spend the bulk of our lives trying to kind of navigate our identities and holding that up against colonial standards of identity. And once we kind of wade through that and start getting into the healing process, we're learning to love ourselves and hold ourselves up. But of course, this part can be challenging as well, that road to liberation. And so I would love to hear more about your personal journey of evolution and what it has taken for you to get to this place and honor your own sacredness.
Yeah, I feel like for myself, I know earlier I talked a little bit about growing up in Oahu in the Kingdom of Hawaii, which I always want to like reiterate as the Kingdom of Hawaii because it was like illegally annexed. But growing up there, I felt really grateful to have grown up with like other like trans indigenous elders, and like I don't know if everyone like knows Kumuhina, but she was at my like trans clinic. So just being like in space with people that have been like such major and essential parts of like these intergenerational relationships of like indigenous youth, like trans and queer youth. I had a few friends that were like native to Turtle Island that I like went to school with, or friends, but mainly people that were like indigenous to the Pacific. So like a lot of Pacifica like relatives that were there. And so I feel like growing up there and thinking about like I guess evolution of identity, like I always grew up around people that had indigenous values, like values for the land, waterways, like systems. And I always would visit California to see my family and relatives here. So I felt very thankful to be really held by like the Pacific Ocean and to like grow up in a place where like I could really go back to like the water. Like my res is like right next to a river and pretty close to the coast. So just like that was something that was like so essential. And that's why I moved back. Like I was in Lenape Hoking for 5 years and I was like, I really need to go back to the water. Um, but I feel like something, even though I grew up around like a lot of indigenous values and like my dad's cousins are Kanaka and I grew up with my grandma who's Yurok, like I still went to like a Catholic all-girls school, which was a missionary school. Like it started off in Hawaii as like a missionary school, and so it was really really cheap for like brown kids to go there because you get a free education. But then you'd be like in the church all the time, and there was, which like, this is nothing to you about like specifically because I'm very like spiritual and isn't as much on like religion, but it is like institutional spaces that like for me like was very queer phobic, transphobic at that school. I ended up coming out as trans when I was like 16. Like I came out really early, like that was 7 years ago. And when I came out, it was like I changed schools. I started going to this trans clinic on island, and so I felt like it was a lot, like I think a lot of cultural stuff for myself, and that cultural evolution, like that was always so present, and it felt only more recently like connecting back to like being closer and visiting like North Cal all the time and driving up, and going with my wife. Like I feel more connected to that now more than ever. But a lot of my youth was really coming into terms with like my trans identity. And like I remember talking to my elder, like to my grandma, about being trans, and she was very like hesitant or like expressed a lot of sentiment that was really hard for me now. But then when I talked with her about like being two spirit, like she was way more like accepting and loving, and she saw it more as like me connecting back to her, and also something that I feel like she's always like felt from me and like being born into. So that was something that like has been so major, and like being more present with my elders here. Like she's a lot older and has health issues, and also the pandemic, so not being able to like see her because of her health issues, I have been able to visit her more often, and I feel like I learn more and more about myself in connecting to like those intergenerational relationships, but also just being present physically with like both queer community, like indigenous community, for myself as like a Korean person too, like my Asian community. And so that's all something that's like been so foundational in me, like, you know, like transitioning into um, being here today. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think it's really important to highlight those intergenerational ties, and I think it's just so beautiful that you had noted how your grandmother had said that it was kind of reconnecting when you know, came out as two spirit, you were reconnecting to her, and that's just so like this, just so beautiful. It makes my heart so happy, and so yeah, I'm so glad those ties exist for you. And I know that you had mentioned, you know, at the beginning that you're a photographer, mixed media artist, and I'd love to know more about how, you know, utilizing these various means of expression as a direct challenge to a violent history of archiving Indigenous and queer people, how that process has been for you.
Yeah. Oh, I just want to check in because I know someone said it's lagging. Can people hear me okay right now? Like, is my um because if anything I can always change rooms. But uh I guess I love that question. I love that question in terms of thinking about challenging both like the archive, but also challenging traditional forms of like media or mediums. I think for myself, something I've been trying to break down like in my life right now is like I feel like there's such like a hierarchy on like craft, like the word craft, and the way that like both like textile work, beading, a lot of like painting or pottery or everything like that has been traditionally like seen as like not like not as important as like a lot of say like all of these like white cis men painters or photographers that have like such like institutional weight, you know. And I think a lot about the way specifically like indigenous femmes have like been making work that's like so powerful, but has always just been dismissed as craft, or like years later is like found in like Stanford's archive or something, you know what I mean? And so right now, like a lot of the work that I do with my paintings or my beading, or like I really want to get into pottery or all of this, like it is like a labor of love from like stuff that I made with like my grandma as a kid, or like art that reminds me and brings me closer to my like queer siblings. Like I, at the beginning of quarantine, I would go to like these different like two spirit circles or beading circles where we just be making art together, and just like knowing that that's something that like has the same type of like leverage or importance as like a film or an image. um I also think specifically in photography, like thinking about challenging the archive, um I think a lot about the ways that photography, like daguerreotypes and the photographs that like white cis anthropologists that worked for like National Geographic and stuff, like the ways that they'd go into communities and be so exploitative, where they're like taking an image of like our elders, of our mothers, of people that like they do not care if they're living after that. They do not care like where their lives are. They're like, this is something that I get to bring back into my like white institutional spaces and get praised for, and make a lot of money off of. And so for myself right now in image making, like that's, I really want to subvert the way that like photographs have acted with like indigenous bodies, with trans bodies, with like the images that I make of like even self portraits of myself. Like I think about too, like for myself as a two-spirit person that has a body that is like, you know, that is like not like a conventionally cis heterosexual body, the way that making images of myself is having that power and agency over myself, rather than having that. And we see it right now. I know I talked to Brandi like off of this call about my, like, you know, my feelings with Pride Month, and the way that a lot of queer creatives are reached out to, especially queer creatives of color. But thinking about the ways that there are these huge teams where it's like white photographers and creative directors that will like want to make an image of like a person like myself, or indigenous queer person, or another trans person, or anyone that's outside of this like white cis heterosexual like standard of like, I guess, beauty or like conventionality of body stuff. I feel like um just seeing how oftentimes like I'm reached out for that, and like what does it mean to just like put my own power into that and like making stuff for myself. um and so I guess like, yeah, when you're talking about like the archive, like I think about that a lot. And at first I used to be really like excited about the archive. I was like, because I did this work where I was doing oral histories with other two spirit friends of mine, and we are just like having conversations, and I was just making these audio recordings with people that didn't end up going anywhere. I didn't post it anywhere. It's literally just for conversations that I wanted to hold with like friends that we could like preserve for ourselves. And then I've just like seen so much violence, but I've seen so much exploitation of like our narratives and people that do come into community that want self-gain out of it. And so I have just been making stuff with like my loved ones and with like my like pod, and just like making that just for ourselves, and sharing stuff when I feel comfortable, when it feels comfortable to my loved ones, but really taking like a huge step back from like, what does the archive mean, or like this preservation, because um, just seeing the ways that people will enter community for that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I'm glad that you highlighted the ways in which, these methods of archiving are so extractive, right? And so just reclaiming that space and finding joy, in these artistic processes, I think are so crucial. And I'm so happy that you're able to do that and find communities, where all of you can be doing that as well and feeding into yourselves. Yes, I wish I had some of that
Literally,
watermelon.
you said getting into yourselves right when I was just grabbing this watermelon.
That is totally fine. Like totally in your zone, and I'm all about it. But yes, no, I just love how you're discussing, being in these various different communities as there is, there are these intersections in terms of your identity, and you have so many different intersecting identities from Indigenous to Two-Spirit, trans, German, Korean, and I'm sure so many more that I'd welcome you to share about if you'd like to. But I'm really interested in seeing how you're honoring all these aspects of yourself, like both individually and collectively.
No, yeah, definitely. I feel like even currently, like my name feels like very much honoring of like my all of my ancestors, because like the name Coyote I chose with my dad. He actually told me, he was like, "Oh, you can either do Coyote or Cobra," and I felt like Cobra was too like hard boy. And like coyotes are seen as like the only animal like in my culture that can shift between genders, and like is like seen as tricksters or shapeshifters. And so I felt like that was really representative of how I felt about my like physical self. And so that's something that I feel like has honored so much of like my background, but also my last name Park. Like, I feel really like honored to have taken like my wife's last name, because we're both like trans and Korean, and my old last name had a lot of like pain around it, because it was like the last name for my like German grandfather, who ended up actually like marrying my like grandma who's indigenous when she was like 16, and he was like double her age and was like a business partner of her family. And like, so, and like I didn't know him, like he passed away when I was really young. And so it felt really like strange to be like really really held by like indigenous and Korean matriarchs in my family. And a lot of the culture that I grew up with was super super passed down by them. Like I would go to like the Korean festival with my nana, or we would like watch like Korean dramas as like a kid together. Like I feel like, especially growing up in Oahu, like I grew up much with like my Asian heritage. And I would go to Korean church with like my friends as a kid and try to learn like more Korean for her. And so I feel like unpacking that and shedding a lot of that shame, like I feel like name and language, especially too, like when I'm learning more Yurok, I feel like I'm talking to my ancestors, or I'm being present for my like grandma. And then if I'm like learning like more Korean, like I feel again like it feels like prayer, like it feels like something where I am um being seen and felt by people that like came before me, that wanted me to be where I'm at now. And so there's so much power and strength in that. And like I used to have like dreams like in Korean where like it would be like sound like just like my nana speaking to me, and it feels like, yeah, I feel very held and just embracing all like aspects of like my culture that I've like both been raised with, like food especially. like um when I got my 111 tattoo done in ceremony, I cooked like a salmon for it, and then I'll always make gogi-chan, which is like meat-chan, for like when I'm celebrating a lot of friends. Because like my grandma, she would make gogi-chan, and like it'd be New Year's, and she'd feed like the whole family. And so when I'm doing those like actions, like it feels like I'm really going through the motions of like stuff that's been done like for generations before me. um I also think understanding that even though like I'm mixed, even though I have all these different types of identities I'm holding, even thinking about my trans ancestors, like my queer ancestors, and my like trans loved ones that have passed away, that are like super super special, that I feel like I carry them with me always. Like understanding that these aren't separate parts of myself, that it is like a table of ancestors, it is a table of like people that have like there's someone who's really really special in New York trans community who passed away pretty recently, only like a year and a half ago, who like I was really, really close to. And I feel like there's so many traits of theirs, like their charisma and their like lovingness and their unconditional care and the way that they would like really just like show up for anyone who's like really going through it. Like I really see so much of that as like lessons that I tried to like adapt to or carry with me or learn from them or try to like bring parts of them with like my living self now, and through that I feel like they're living with me. And I feel that with like a lot of different like people and like cultural stuff, the gender stuff, everything.
I think that's so beautiful that you're able to, touch on each of these identities, but collectively, and as you stated, all of your ancestors are at the table. There is no separation, and I think it's so beautiful to name that and capture that, and also just the way that you're feeling when you're going through certain actions, what in cooking and just feeling directly in line with your ancestors. It's so
Yeah,
beautiful,
thank you.
um, and thank you for sharing about that. Um, I know that you do have an event coming up with your lovely wife, T. It's coming up on July 5th called Tea for Tea Magic Joys. I think Joys and Challenges of a Trans Relationship. Um, what was the inspiration behind that event, and what is the importance of having events such as these?
Yeah, that event actually, so the date got pushed back because it was supposed to be originally this month a few days ago, but because of like both Pride Month and because T and I were traveling and coming back, like I had this last minute show in New York that I got back from, which was like, it's called Chosen. It's still up. My work isn't up in the gallery, but other artists' work is up because it's a rotational show. But it's the show like is about like POC like queer family systems. And I just got back from tea with that, and we pushed off the date for this current event to July. But I did, so it's hosted by this like intimacy workshop space. They're also like they do like they have a sex shop, and it's like a very like like sexual liberation like space. And I did a past talk with them back in February on trans intimacy and talking about like and it was really cool to see all the support that came through for that and what like people left with that. So I was planning on doing another one with them. And then originally I was supposed to do like a solo like one where I was supposed to come in and talk about another topic, but I really wanted to hold space with T because there's a lot of like learning that we've been going through, especially in regards to like trans relationships and different trans experiences, and understanding that we both have like our own personal experiences. And I feel like with T for T relationships, I think there's always like the common understanding of people being like, oh, like T for T is like so powerful, which it is really, really powerful. But I feel like there's always this understanding that like, oh, you connect and understand your partner like completely, which I feel like it's so important to recognize ways that like in our own trans experiences, like for myself, like T like isn't like indigenous two-spirit person, so there's like a lot of like learning from that. And I'm not like a trans woman, so thinking about the ways that like I like really have to step back and listen and hear what she's experiencing and how I can best show up. And so I'm really excited for this workshop and this talk space for us to kind of like navigate both like the difficulties. We're also non-monogamous, so it brings in a whole other element of like care and a whole other element of making each other feel like wanted, or navigating like trans like dysphoria stuff or like jealousy or all of us like, and then compersion on the other end of that. And so like I do like I feel like these events are really important because they're conversations that growing up, I never really saw. Like, I learned from friends, or I learned in like action and experience. And sometimes I wish I had just even though T and I are in our 20s and we're not like older queer elders, like I feel like we're still queer elders to like the version of myself that was going to like the trans clinic when they're like in high school. And so thinking about being like in a space where even if we're not even like doing like a teaching thing or viewing ourselves as teachers necessarily, even if it's just us like just talking about like our like whole journey together, like if that's able to reach out to anyone, like then that's like so major. Because you know, when I was a younger trans person and coming into that, like I felt so like unlovable for a really long time because I didn't see like I didn't see a lot of people like me in relationships, or like loving relationships, or relationships that um like that aren't always just like it's funny saying picturesque, because I do share a lot of like these really like beautiful, sweet, tender moments. But like um with this talk, we really want to highlight like everything, like the challenges, the struggles, like the moments that we really had to come together for. And so I think that this goes beyond just like my regular posting of like photographs or images of us, because it's more on like our like experience outside of just this visual depiction of our relationship. Um, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing about that and really emphasizing how, when you were younger, you didn't have this space, right? So you're creating this space, and it's a place of honesty, talking about um, obviously the struggles that can ensue in T for T relationships, and beyond, the picturesque um, thoughts around that. And so truly a crucial and necessary space for folks, and I'm so glad that you're able to create that. And similarly, on that note, I know that there are a lot of queer folks out there navigating the totality of their identities, especially our youth. And obviously, this world can be so unkind with colonization, um, kind of entrenched in our own indigenous communities, and kind of leaving our LGBT plus community members out. So, what words of medicine do you have for our next generation as they step out and begin their journeys?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is that we're all like possible of like a life full of like love, but also full of like really rewarding moments and a lot of just like depth that I feel like um sometimes I think that, you know, especially for indigenous youth, like when I was younger, a common experience with me and like friends of mine that were also like native here is sometimes, especially culturally, because of the violence of like colonization and the violence of like missionary shit and like all this stuff, like our elders, like, you know, like it isn't in our nature to be homophobic or queerphobic or transphobic. Like it isn't in our nature. If anything, in our nature is like something that's way beyond like these like gender and sexuality labels, especially Eurocentric like ones. And so um, I think that just recognizing that our queerness is not in opposition of our indigeneity is so important. And I think that it's really hard to unpack and release that shame when there are like elders or people in community that maybe make us feel like by being out as gay or trans or queer or non-binary, you know, or everything beyond just those like words or labels. um I think that sometimes like it's hard when we come out and it distances us from our elders because it feels like it distances us from our culture. But just knowing that we are like in our way, like we are our own elders, we are like we will like for me like reconnecting, especially on social media through like here with other Yurok Two Spirit people. Like I met a lot of other Yurok Two Spirit people, a lot of Yurok Indigenous queer people. Like that was so beautiful because I was like, I know other indigenous queer people, but to see people that are actively practicing my like specific culture and come from the same stories as me and come because like we aren't a monolith, and that's the biggest thing like over and over again that we have to like both remind ourselves and others because like a lot of people too they have this like fantasy or like type of like what a native person is and or isn't and but being with people that are in my specific culture but are like identify as queer and have gone through their own journeys to love themselves, like that was something that like hundreds of like transphobic or queerphobic like people within like our own community could like never match like that, like you know, like it just like there's that one person like really makes like me feel really set in myself. And so just understanding for like other like queer youth or indigenous youth or people that are trying to find like hope and hold on to hope for like the importance of our lives in space and in physical space and in this world and our lifetimes is just knowing that that is available to us, like and just you and being yourself, you're making that available to others and to your community and just to yourself.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that I'm in my 30s, but still my that baby queer in me is still hearing those words and finds, you know, those words so useful. And I know that our viewers are finding that useful and medicine for sure. I wish this conversation could go on for 24 hours straight. I've loved our time together here today. Indian Collective wants to thank you, Coyote, for being here and for sharing your medicine and being unabashedly yourself, a monumental pillar of light for so many of those tuning in and for those who will be watching this later. I also owe you a letter because we are pen pals. I still consider us pen pals.
I feel like it's
Be
my
sure to
turn.
follow.
It's
It
my
might
turn.
be. We could just send letters. We could
Okay.
send letters. We could both send letters. It's fine. There's no system. Um, be sure to follow Coyote on Instagram at Native Boy Toy, and we'll also drop that Venmo down into the chat again. Show your love there. Shout out to the Indian Comms team for pulling this all together. And last but not least, all of our viewers, I want to give you a moment, Coyote, if you want to thank everyone watching, feel free to do so.
Yeah, no, totally. It's really exciting to see a few of my two spirit siblings in the chat that have like come in, stopped in to say hi. But also to see like new faces and new people, but also to hear. I know I wasn't in the chat like writing back to everyone, but like even when we were talking about the archive and like different things like that, like it was so meaningful and special to hear people like contributing to the conversation. And so for anybody who's able to like go through into the chat while like I was talking, like I'm just really thankful for that like involvement. And it does make me feel like like that people are present. And also to yeah, you can find my work on my Instagram. My Venmo like is Coyote Park. As said here, like if you want to help buy me some beads for this powwow, because I'm going to this Two Spirit powwow in Arkansas, which is actually where my mom's from, and my grandpa and uncle are buried in the town that the Two Spirit powwow is in. So it's like really special. And like also to like my uncle who's buried there, like who is native, died because of like gay violence stuff. So to be in a space where it is like a queer native powwow, like it feels like I'm honoring like my like queer ancestors that way. So yeah, if you want to support me in buying art supplies, I'll show people. I was showing Brandi this painting earlier, but I just made this painting. which like I'm gonna be making more smaller paintings like this when I for the powwow to sell. But that's for this native exhibition that's coming out next month, which is an online show. And that will be on my Instagram. It's like an all native exhibition on folk stories through art. So that painting is on how water was brought to my tribe. And so, yeah, I just like anyone wants to send me any funds for art making stuff, that would be really appreciative, or I can use it to buy my wife this sometime. But yeah, thank you for coming out and listening to my life. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Coyote. Thank you for all of those who tuned in. Hopefully, we can have you on again soon. Thank you, relatives. Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.
I love you.